to the Daily Grind, and shout out to the full-time patrons. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
And it looks like from a Vitor Belfort Instagram post that we can confirm that Mark Hunt will be replacing Fabricio Verdum to fight Alexei Oleinik in the UFC's debut in Russia. Now this is interesting, and the UFC hasn't officially announced this fight, but there have definitely been reports that this fight was targeted. I believe we're just waiting on confirmation from Mark Hunt's camp or the UFC to officially announce the fight. But with that being said, you can see in this picture that Instagram on Vitor Belfort, this is the post that he posted. He said, "This is the room where the magic happens. Away from the spotlight, here's where all the matches are decided and where great ideas are born. Maybe the Legend League will be born here as well. Thanks Dana White for the talk. It was great to remember the past and share ideas for the future." Now I'm telling you right now, the UFC Legend League is an idea that they should do, in my opinion. If it was a Legends League, you change the rules to make it more better for the veterans, you know what I'm saying, of the sport that have already earned their name. They've already put in the work. They've fought their toughest fights. And now they would like to fight guys on their level, right? You don't want to see Anderson Silva going in there and just getting demolished by the next young up-and-coming title contender just because he's fighting in the UFC, right? So you see, that's why a lot of veterans go over to Bellator, because you can kind of get that sort of matchmaking. You know, you can go to Bellator and fight a guy on your level instead of having to fight one of these fucking sharks in the UFC. So a UFC Legend League would also kind of help them keep some of those names so they wouldn't all have to go to Bellator. You could keep the guys, like now you got Chuck Liddell talking about fighting Tito Ortiz. You could have them fighting in the UFC Legend League. Whenever Vitor Belfort's done fighting in the UFC, he could fight in the Legends League. So, and it's kind of like, it reminds me of like the big three for the NBA, right? You got the NBA, and then for the guys that have retired but are still good, or they're not in the league for whatever reason, they're playing in the big three. And that's still, I don't know how successful the big three is, but I like the idea of that, and I know they're still going. So I like the UFC Legend League idea, and I know Vitor Belfort has been an advocate of it. But with that being said, this is the picture behind the post. And it's funny because you can see all of the matches and the main events so far for the UFC so far in 2018. Now look behind. You see, I'll just start right here. Rivera versus Moraes, that already happened. Whitaker versus Romero, that happened. Cowboy versus Edwards. Tavares versus Adesanya. Jocic versus Cormier. Dos Santos versus Ivanov just happened. Next weekend, Ozdemir versus Rua. Anthony Smith replaced Ozdemir. You got Alvarez versus Poirier. Garbrandt versus Dillashaw. Gaethje versus Vick. Hunt versus Oleinik. So with that being said, Hunt versus Oleinik being right there seems to be official as a whistle. It's on the board, and we'll see what happens. The UFC didn't come out and post this on their Twitter or anything yet and make it official, but this is what a lot of fans are speculating because that post right there. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. What do you think about a potential fight between Mark Hunt and Alexei Oleinik? And also there's a little fun little backstory to this as well, kind of in the rivalry of Mark Hunt and Fabricio Verdum. If you remember, Mark Hunt was supposed to fight Marcin Tybura, I believe, but after the UFC pulled him from the fight, due to his interview he did where he was saying he was starting to slur his words and it seemed like have concussion-like symptoms, the UFC pulled him from that fight. And they got Fabricio Verdum to replace Mark Hunt. And now when that happened already, Fabricio Verdum and Mark Hunt don't like each other. Mark Hunt's been wanting a rematch with Fabricio Verdum, and he feels like Fabricio Verdum is ducking his motherfucking taco, even though Fabricio Verdum did win the first fight. But now, since they haven't got the rematch in, we have saw Fabricio Verdum get Mark Hunt's fight. You know, kind of taking everything he worked for, motherfucker. Not taking everything he worked for, but taking his main event. And I believe it was also in Auckland or somewhere in Australia or New Zealand where Mark Hunt would have had the home crowd on his side. It was his main event as well. Now we got Fabricio Verdum, who fell out of this fight, and he got flagged by USADA, and it looks like Mark Hunt might be still in his main event. So that's kind of a cool little backstory to this if Mark Hunt does get announced to fight Oleinik, which I believe will be the case. But yeah, man, let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. And before we go, shout out to all the full-time MMA white belts that have hit the subscribe button. Also, make sure you hit the bell right next to it so you get notified every time I upload a new video. And this is the hardest working MMA channel on YouTube. We provide daily updates, predictions, betting advice, we do songs, we do fantasy fights. We've interviewed Aljamain Sterling, Sean O'Malley, Bruce Lachmedio, and Felony Charles Bennett, all in just 1 year as an MMA channel. We're one of the fastest growing MMA channels on the net, but we're still small, so make sure you guys go check out the Full-Time MMA Dojo if you want to learn how you can become a full-time MMA black belt. And while you're there, you can see where this MMA channel started from, some of the goals we have for the channel, and even more cool videos just like this one if you enjoyed it. So thanks again to all the full-time MMA white belts that have hit the subscribe button, and also if you're just lurking and this is your first time seeing a video, appreciate that as well. I'm out.
Da 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 da! It's the motherfucking DOG.